Well, even after the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders insisted the president's use of the phrase breeding concept in a tweet about sanctuary cities was not coded racial language, well, it remains unconvinced.
What does breeding mean to this president? Because when you think of breeding, you think of animals breeding, populated.
I'm not going to begin to think what you think. Certainly, I think that it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but the president is talking about a growing problem.
One reason people may have a hard time buying it is because it's just the latest in a number of comments which seem to set a pattern here. Before this latest excuse goes down the memory hole, as they so often do, let's put it in context and talk about it and why it's so unprecedented and damaging. Long before throwing his hat into the ring for president, Trump spent years suggesting that the nation's first black president was born in Kenya and not an American citizen, denigrating the first African-American president. If you're waiting for an apology, I hope you haven't been holding your breath.
Does that mean that he's willing to apologize for birtherism claims that he called on for years?
I think the president has made plenty of comments on that front.
In fact, even after the president was forced to recant his birther theory, which he did very begrudgingly, there have been reports he still believes it. After NFL players began following the example of Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem to protest a number of unarmed black Americans being killed by police, the president said this.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
Again, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tried to clarify.
You're missing the entire purpose of the message. He's emphasizing something that should be unifying. Celebrating and promoting patriotism in our country is something that should bring everybody together.
So he wasn't trashing the players for using their free speech rights. He was trying to unite. Then there's the president's leaked comments expressing frustration about why the U.S. keeps admitting people from S-hole countries, listing a continent and countries with major black and brown people and not more people from places like Norway. Clarifying, if you can call it that, again, Sarah Sanders.
No one here is going to pretend like the president is always politically correct. He isn't. I think that's one of the reasons the American people love him.
Not all of the American people love this. The president's approval rating around the time of those comments, 38%. I want to bring in now CNN political commentators Angela Rye, Amanda Carpenter, and Scott Jennings. It just keeps happening. Like he keeps saying things that are just blatantly racist. People keep explaining it in a way. You get the Trump tweet whispers or whatever the whispers they come on, and they're like, "Oh no, he didn't mean that." People love it, and this whole, it's ridiculous. And then we forget about it and move on. Angela, you know, him tweeting about breeding is the most recent example of this pattern. He says or tweets something that's racist, and then Sanders stands at the podium and she tries to spin it. Is this normalizing racism?
I think the moment Donald Trump became the Republican nominee, they agreed to normalize racism. They are eons beyond where they were in 2012 when they decided to issue a GOP autopsy report studying, right, how they can engage with communities of color and women and millennials better. And instead of really leaning into what those findings might have been, although let me be honest, they weren't that great, they really could have made some marked progress, right? And at this point, they haven't been able to do that because you cannot change and adjust a message for policies that are woefully horrible. Whether we're talking about the war on drugs, which right now we're in war on drugs 2.0 under Donald Trump, but there was a war on drugs before Donald Trump that existed with Ronald Reagan. And so you have to at some point say, just as Harry Reid said it best, Donald Trump is the Republican Party's Frankenstein. They have to own this. This is their problem that they helped to create. And the very fact, Amanda, you can roll your eyes, but the reality of it is.
Okay, but you are ignoring all Republicans
but I'm not done.
have
But I'm not.
all
I am.
that
But I am.
one at a
But I
time.
am.
One
But
at a
I am.
time.
But I am. But I am. And I'm just at the
Finish your
comment. I
point.
just know that I will, and I don't need your permission to do that. Okay. So here's the bottom line.
Here we go.
Speaker Ryan, yes, we're just getting started, honey. Speaker Ryan is someone who now is leaving because he would rather run away from a problem that he helped to create with his silence and his cowardice instead of standing up for what is right to do, not only in this country, for people of color, for women, for young people, for disabled people. It's been time for them to stand up.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Here is what is so frustrating. There are very political types on the left who will do anything they can to lump any Republican, marry them to Trump. People like me who at every opportunity have tried to speak out against his bigotry, against his terrible comments, who supported people like a Ted Cruz at the convention who tried to stop him or at least get a roll call vote at that nomination. And so what has happened is that good people are just leaving. You want them to stay and fight. You will berate people like Paul Ryan because they didn't fight hard enough, when all that does is make it so that only the Trumpiest Trump people are controlling the White House. You say every Republican is a racist because, you know, the war on drugs, or insert whatever policy there is. That's what it always gets back to. And so, yes, I take responsibility for what my party did to create Trump, but when are the liberals going to do that?
What's the question? Liberals going to do what?
What Republican is acceptable to you? Paul Ryan's not good enough.
But Amanda,
Mitt Romney's probably not good enough. Bob Corker's probably not good enough.
But here's the thing,
who
Amanda,
would be a worthy Republican opposition partner
Amanda,
for you
you
today?
know what's so
Name
interesting is there's a very country saying in the South. They say a hit dog will holler. And what's so interesting is you're somebody who I would have never lumped in with these folks, right? I'm talking about Republican leadership.
When you say they,
so then you're not going to let me finish. But I was talking about elected Republican candidates in the Republican Party. I'm talking about the way that your party treated Michael Steele, someone who came
Angela,
up with
Angela, hold on. We're talking about now, and listen, and that's fine, but no one is to the degree that Donald Trump has said things and put things out there in terms of race, and I don't know any other Republican that I can.
I'm not talking. That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about people who allowed it to happen, right? Like she just brought up Ted Cruz, which Amanda is a great point. You are being more courageous than Ted Cruz. I never came after you.
Well,
you're someone who I respect. You have been very consistent. You know Ted Cruz hasn't. Let's just be honest. I have former bosses who I'm ride or die for.
Let her respond.
He's not been any courageous example of how to stand up to Donald Trump. Let's be honest.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Well, I would say a part of that problem, and listen, I didn't like the piece that Ted Cruz wrote for Donald Trump in Time magazine, but you had people who were willing to take it to the convention. And when people were doing things like that, you said, not you. A lot of people, what a jerk. He went to the party, drank the wine, and peed on the carpet. We're saying things like that. And so when you have Republicans who are trying to stand up and hold the line, and all they get told is that you're not acting the right way, you're not